all human beings want to live a life of greatness. Young people, especially, with their enthusiasm and idealism, don't want to settle for mediocrity. They want to live lives that are extraordinary and remarkable, lives that shape and change the world for the better. Today's gospel makes an invitation to do just that, to put out into deep water, as Jesus says, and to lower your nets for a catch. So often, though, our own self-doubts and negative attitudes, our fear of humiliation and failure cause us to stay safely on the shore, or to wade only so far out into calm and shallow waters. Like Peter, we're convinced that there's nothing more that we can do. We've worked hard all night, and we've simply caught nothing. Our three readings today offer a different way forward. Together, they lay out the path of all Christian discipleship and tell us that the invitation to put out into the deep is made to all of us, even here and now. Our readings show us that when we come into an experience of the Lord's presence, when we encounter him in our lives, we can become more, not less, aware of our own sinfulness and weakness. But despite our weakness, we also experience, in a completely unmerited way, the mercy and grace of the Lord. And in turn, we're sent out on mission to extend his reign. There is a strand of modern spirituality, and I think it's especially true here in the United States, that says all will be right with us if only we think that all will be right with us. It's a sort of self-help gospel that preaches the power of positive thinking, our own ability to control our destiny and to be the great people that we want to be. I think that real life proves the emptiness of such a spirituality. If it were simply that easy, we'd all be happy and fulfilled all the time. So it's no surprise that our readings today start someplace completely different. In our first reading, the prophet Isaiah experiences a vision of the Lord and exclaims, "Woe is me! I am doomed. I am a man of unclean lips." In the presence of the Lord, he becomes more, not less aware of the fact that he is not God. He is a weak and sinful creature. St. Paul, too, in our second reading to the Corinthians, writes, "I am the least of the apostles, not fit even to be called an apostle because I have persecuted the church of God." Paul recognizes that his sinful past has not earned him in any way the many graces and favors he's received from the Lord. And in today's gospel, St. Peter is astonished at the miraculous catch of fish. In humble fear of God's awesome power, he says, "Depart from me, Lord. I am a sinful man." The lessons of the entirety of the Scriptures is that we cannot make ourselves right. We cannot save ourselves. We cannot fulfill our own destinies. Rather, the only one who can make us right, can make us all we were meant to be and all we hope to be, is God himself. And it's true. The closer we come to the presence of Jesus Christ, the closer we come to the light of his truth, the more we become aware of our own sinfulness and weakness. We become less sure of ourselves, less confident in our own power and in our own control of the world. And yet all the saints show us that this realization is never crippling. It's not about guilt or self-deprecation or self-loathing. In fact, the saints show us that quite the opposite is true. This encounter with Christ and this experience of our own sinfulness teaches us that we cannot rely on ourselves or on our own power, but must give ourselves over completely and rely on God's power alone. As we see clearly also in all three readings, God is perfectly ready and willing to give us the forgiveness we so desperately need as soon as we come to him. Immediately after Isaiah confesses his unclean lips, an angel comes to him in a vision and places a burning coal upon his lips and says, "See, now your wickedness is removed, your sins are purged." St. Paul, too, writes in his letter that by the grace of God I am what I am, and his grace in me has not been ineffective. In the gospel, Jesus does not tell Peter that he's wrong, that he's not a sinner, or that he's really not that bad in the end. What Jesus does say, simply and powerfully, is, do not be afraid. In other words, refuse to be mastered by your sinfulness, Peter. Know that I am more powerful than any sin or death. All three of our readings also make clear that Christian spirituality never stops with this awareness of our own sinfulness or even our reception of God's forgiveness and mercy. We can always be sure that the final step of true Christian discipleship is to be sent out on mission. God has a job for each and every one of us to do. It is only for us to answer his call and to cooperate with the grace that he gives us. And so, in Isaiah's vision, he hears the Lord ask, "Whom shall I send?" And with confidence, Isaiah responds immediately, "Here I am, send me." In his letter to the Corinthians, St. Paul makes clear that he has not been doing his own bidding as he preaches the gospel and writes his letters. Rather, he says, "I handed on to you as of first importance what I myself had received." Finally, in today's gospel, Jesus calls Peter and the other apostles to join him on mission, promising them that from now on they will be catching people. And St. Luke records that they left everything and followed him immediately. Friends, these three steps encapsulate the entirety of the Christian life. They show us the pattern of every Christian vocation, whether we're called to be a spouse or a parent, a teacher or a doctor, or any other state in life or occupation or calling. These are also the three necessary ingredients of a truly great life, because they're built upon the greatness of God, not upon our own strength. This pattern is perhaps especially true for men and women whom God calls to the consecrated life, to life as a priest, brother, or sister in a religious community. I say this because today the Church in the United States is observing World Day for Consecrated Life, a day inaugurated in 1997 by Venerable Pope John Paul II to provide an opportunity for all the people of God to come to a greater awareness of and appreciation for the call to consecrated life. In a world that tends to focus on the here and now, tends to think of the gifts of this world as ends in themselves, consecrated religious are called to witness to a kingdom that is yet to come in its fullness. They do so by no power of their own. They do so aware of their own weakness and sinfulness. They do so by only the grace that they have received, by no merit of their own. They lay down the entirety of their lives, and by the vows they profess, they show forth in the church and in the world Jesus Christ, who is himself the poor one and the chaste one and the obedient one. This is indeed a remarkable and extraordinary life, to be the presence of Christ for the church and the world. Some of the young people here today, and others listening online or on TV, are even now being called by the Lord to put out into deep water and to lower your nets for a catch. Christ is inviting you to be his presence in the world, to call others to greater life in him. My advice to you is simple. Do not be afraid. Answer with Isaiah, "Here I am, send me." May this Eucharist give all of us the courage and the strength that is required to put out into the deep, and strengthen the faith in us that is required to expect an abundant catch.